Hello, I'm Jenya DeLima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Have you ever finished reading a story and realized it's just taught you an important lesson? These types of stories and their lessons can have a lasting impact, but the secret to writing one is to hide that message in plain sight. Bill Cates did just that by using parables as lessons in his book, The Hidden Heist, and he's here to tell us how he did it. Thanks so much for being here today, Bill.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
Why do you think that stories hold so much potential for sharing important lessons with their readers?
Well, yeah, I mean, people take in stories differently than the straight how-to information. And so I've written several how-to books, nonfiction business books. And I'm kind of a straightforward writer, generally speaking. But I knew that the message I wanted to get out with this book, The Hidden Heist, would be served to be in a story. I had in the back of my brain, back burner of my brain, an idea for a parable book. And there's some good parable books and some bad parable books. I've read both. In fact, the gentleman who wrote the foreword to The Hidden Heist, John David Mann, is a pretty well-known parable book writer. He was the co-author of the Go-Giver series with Bob Berg. He's also written novels, and he wrote the foreword to the book. And he said, "A parable book is easy to write." Let me scratch that. A bad parable book is easy to write.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of great parable books written over the years. The Go-Giver series is one with Bob Berg, more recent. All of the 1 Minute Manager and Who Moved My Cheese parable books. Not to be confused, by the way, with fables. People make that mistake sometimes. Fables have animals, parables have people. And we can dive into the book, but I just knew that it would be a message well received through a story. And by the way, I have a co-author, Jeff C. West, who I couldn't have done it without him. Again, I'm the straightforward guy. I knew what I wanted to communicate. I knew the concepts. I had an idea for the plot and the settings. But then Jeff C. West is the storyteller. He's the parable book writer, so to speak. And he brought, helped bring the characters to life. And so it was a real collaboration. And then at the end, by the way, because I'm the straightforward guy, I want to make sure everyone's getting the lesson. The story is so interesting and so compelling, and we can get into that and why it is. But I was afraid that people would just love the story, which they do, but then miss the lesson.
Oh, right.
So we have 3 appendices in the back, short appendices to say, all right, here's what we were teaching if you missed it from the story, just to make sure you walk away with the good lessons.
Mhm. So, what would you say makes a parable good or bad?
Yeah, well, a story it's kind of like a novel, but not quite. Meaning, there's character development, there's a scene description, some of the things that make a really good, well-researched novel. You love it when people really get into the development of the character and the development of the surroundings and the context. But you don't have the time, the luxury to do it as deep as you do with a novel, but you do some of it. And so that's one part. A lot of parable books are extremely predictable. That's not always a bad thing, right? I mean, we'll watch movies and TV shows where we kind of know what's happened. Sometimes it's actually, they show us the ending, right? And then we want to see how they got there. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's most parable books aren't particularly interesting to read. The story isn't interesting. You keep wanting to, all right, get me the lesson, get me the lesson, get me the lesson, right? I get very bored with the bad parable books. This book, on the other hand, there's twists, there's turns. And by the way, just real quick, it takes place in a bank robbery. I wanted that. I wanted to grab people. First line of the book is everybody face down on the floor. That's not your typical parable book,
No.
right? It's got a lot of comic relief, though. You have to put a lot of comic relief. I was listening to your podcast interview from the gal who talked about horror and comedy,
Ah, yes.
right? And that's what that's what comic relief does, right? And you need that release of tension. There's a lot of it in this book, and through the characters and all. So anyway, that's the essence of why that, and in this case, using a co-author to help bring it to life. Yeah, so we can get into the story a little more and the lessons if you want. Up to you. I'll
Oh,
let you
yeah,
take the
we
lead.
absolutely will. But before we do, was there a
Sure.
book that fundamentally changed the way you think, or even a book that served or used parables that inspired you when you were writing this one?
Well, Og Mandino, great author, great speaker, he wrote a book called The Greatest Salesman in the World.
Mhm.
It's a parable book. There's another great parable book called The Alchemist. I forgot who wrote it.
Oh,
So those were a couple that really inspired me. And then when I got this idea for this book, I called Bob Berg, who wrote the Go Giver series, and I said, Bob, tell me about this guy, John David Mann, who was helped you write that. Because
hmm.
Bob's kind of like me. He's a straightforward guy, and he needed John David Mann. And he says, well, you can't afford him. And and the whole point I'm telling you this is because when I read Bob Berg's and John David Mann's parable book, I said, now that's a good parable book, right? I recognized it immediately because it was a good story in addition to the teachings. Um, and so, and just to finish the story, he says, well, you can't afford him. I said, well, okay, why is that? He says, well, he starts and he gave me a number. I said, yeah, you're probably right. I can't justify the ROI. He says, but I got somebody for you.
Mm.
He and I have just written a book together. They wrote a book called Streetwise to Saleswise, another parable book, Bob Berg and Jeff C. West. And so Jeff and I just like hit it off immediately.
Oh, that's always
He's
nice.
got a bit of a financial background like I do, a writing background. It was just, a little bit of fun sarcasm along the way.
Also,
We
always nice.
Yeah, so we actually wrote the whole book, published the book, everything without meeting each other. It was all done with Zoom and telephone, mostly Zoom. And then I finally met him after the book came out, and it was kind of like almost like a reunion.
Aw, oh, that's so nice. Well, so getting into your book specifically, how did you incorporate parables into the hidden heist? And what narrative elements did you use to either draw this out or to keep them more in the background?
Yeah, so it's a complicated question. I kind of touched on it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So here was kind of the process. I said to Jeff, I said, here's the idea, here's the concept. I've conducted over 100 money story interviews. And so the book, by the way, it's about your money beliefs. I should probably read the full title so people understand what we're talking about here. It's The Hidden Heist, Stop Robbing Yourself of Lasting Wealth. And then kind of a subtitle is An Irresistible Tale of Financial Redemption. So it's about money beliefs. It's about the limiting beliefs, mistaken beliefs that we acquire when we're young, some of the only partially true stereotypes that exist out there, and all of these things conspire to rob you of your financial future. Hence, the hidden heist. That was Jeff's contribution, by the way. The title, the hidden heist. At first, I
Oh,
didn't like it, but it started to grow on me, and then everyone said, "Oh, everyone loves a good heist, and a bank robbery," and then so it grew on me, and it turns out it's a good title. So I said, "All right, here's what we want to do." And here's some of the beliefs you want to bring. So Jeff actually did this. He assigned the belief to a different character. So each character in the book expresses one of the beliefs that may
mm.
be mistaken, limiting. Um, all of the characters, by the way, are based on real people. I mean, it's a fictional story, but for example, the kind of the hero, the parable always has the hero, the teacher, the guru, the sage, whatever. He's based on a real character. We interviewed a real hostage negotiator
Oh, that's right.
because we wanted to, what would they really do in a bank robbery? What would really
Yeah.
happen? Would they cut off the electricity, the water, the this, the that, right? And by the way, one of the things that the book offers, and I recommend this to any writers, any self-publishers, I've done this with a lot of my books. I always have additional material.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone gets the book, they can quote unquote register the book and then get more material. So in ours, it's called the Vault. And so when you get the book, you get the code to the vault. And some of the items in the vault are the interview with the hostage negotiator. It's
That
fascinating.
is so neat. Yeah.
We interviewed a couple of real life bank robbery victims.
Mm-hmm.
And so those interviews are in there as well. So all of that, is kind of based on true folks. So then Jeff wrote a chapter, and I said, he says, "What do you think? What do you think of the tone?" And I love the immediate use of comic relief, of humor, because a bank robbery can be there can be a lot of tension. I didn't want to have too much tension. But I wanted some suspense. I wanted twists and turn, and he did a masterful job. In fact, there's a twist at the end that nobody sees coming. I had one person write to me and said it brought a tear to my eye. And I go,
Wow.
"Whoa, that's cool." Just kind of back to your question,
Hmm.
it was a constant back and forth of idea exchange, and then we used beta readers, which I highly recommend, because sometimes there are things that are obvious to you, the writer, that someone reading it for the first time just doesn't get. That
Yeah,
you miss the
exactly.
context. So we used a lot of beta readers for the financial teachings, as well as the plot and the story itself. So that's a little bit. And then finally, real quick, I've always done audiobooks. I've always done audio versions. I've read mine, but this has characters. This has about 8 or 9 main characters, if you
Hmm.
will. So you got to bring those voices to life, and I couldn't do that. Jeff couldn't do it. We could have pulled a couple off, but so we hired a gentleman by the name of Jonathan McLean, who's a professional book actor. He does it for Random House and Simon Schuster, and so he read the book for us. And so all the characters with the different voices that a good book actor can do
Hmm.
came live. So actually, we're selling more audiobooks than we are hardcover and paperbacks.
Oh, interesting.
Um,
Was that a
yeah,
surprise?
it is a bit of a surprise because usually it's about 25-30% of the market these days around business books. I wouldn't say we're pushing it, but we're encouraging that. So we have a landing page for the book. It's
Hmm.
The Hidden Heist, thehiddenheist.com. And if you go there, you'll see a book trailer, a real quick book trailer, also narrated by this professional. But then we have chapter one narrated by this professional. So people are listening to chapter one on the book's homepage, and so they're getting a feel for the audio, and they're
Hmm.
going, maybe the audio would be good for this one. And so I think that's why we're selling more audios. Unexpected, but we'll take it. As long as we get the message out. This is my legacy work. This is my mission to get financial literacy in the hands and the hearts and the heads of as many people as possible.
And what made you decide to go this route versus what you'd done in the past where it had been nonfiction and interviews?
I just think that it needed a story to carry the teachings,
Hmm.
because first of all, it's geared towards a little bit of a younger audience. And I also did a TED talk recently, recorded a TEDx talk
Yeah,
based on the
congratulations on
principles.
that.
Thank you. Based on it's. I don't know if it'll be live by the time this airs, but you can go poking around for it. It's Bill Cates, Cates. I like to make the joke. It's not Bill Gates. I missed it by one letter and a
So
few
close.
bucks. Yeah, but anyway, and it's based on the teachings in the book. So I knew that the bubble, if you will, the largest group of listeners for TED Talks are millennials and
Mhm.
older Gen Zs. So I knew that was a population I would be reaching with the TED. And I knew that with the book, some of the teachings and the lessons we give around creating your own personal wealth and financial stability, et cetera, would be great for the next generation for me, the millennials
Yeah.
and the Gen Z. And so I just knew that they didn't need an older guy telling them what to do, right? Let them learn in a fun way.
Hmm.
And so that's another reason we went the parable route because of the audience we were trying to reach. We
Mm.
wanted to make the message accessible as possible.
That's a good observation too, to think about what's going to land the best with your audience and how that might have differed if you'd had an audience that wasn't this age, or even people who already had, let's say, a base foundation of knowledge that you were then building upon rather than trying to give them more of an introduction to it earlier in their life.
Well, a principle, yes, I agree. Thank you. And a principle of marketing that a lot of people miss is start with who.
Mm-hmm.
Who is the audience? Yeah, you know what you want to do. You know the story. You know your why. You know you want to get it out there. Okay, yeah, yeah. But when in terms of actually creating the product, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
you need to start with the who, and that's going to dictate a lot,
Oh, yeah.
right? It's going to dictate references to things that may date you as an author. I mean, if I'm talking about things that I, as a baby boomer, could appreciate, I'm going to lose folks that are younger than me. So everything has to be. Can I give you an example? It's
Oh,
kind
of
of a,
course.
yeah. So you know how a lot of books will have little call outs or quotes, and on a blank page, there'll be a quote or something like that. Jeff sent a bunch to me. We had about 17 pages where there was space for something like this. And I said to him, I said, Jeff, do you realize that every quote you sent to me to review is from a dead white man? And he goes, "Oh, I never even paid attention to that." I said, "Well, let's fix that, right?"
Yes.
So we rather actually than trying to do, I'm a big believer in diversity and diversity of message and inclusion and all that stuff. For this book, what made it the easiest way to go for this is we had all the quotes actually come from the main character, the hero of the story. So it
Oh,
was his teachings. So then we didn't have to really worry about, did we include everyone? Did we miss anyone?
mhm. What a fun idea, though, too. Because you don't see something like that very often, but also it's giving them, before they've even started, you're giving them a little bit of a glimpse into who this person is that they're going to be introduced to quite soon.
Yes, yeah, I'll give you an example of one. Alden Beckett is the name of the main character. Happens to be a financial advisor. They're stuck in the vault while the robbers, the Bumbly robbers, the Three Stooges robbers, are trying to figure out how do they get out of this predicament. With the SWAT, the leader of the SWAT, her name is Gabby. So they're talking with Carl and the robbers, and in the meantime, the hostages, if you will. And by the way, hostage negotiators do not call them hostages.
Mm,
It's easy for me to do it that way to explain it, but in the book, you see the difference. And so they're in the vault, and then they're talking about money and why are these guys robbing the bank? And money is a zero sum game. If you have it, I don't. If I don't, no, that's not true. Money is actually an unlimited resource. There's plenty for everyone if you get into the flow, and all of those things come out. And so one of Alden's quotes is, "Money is meant to be used, and people are meant to be loved. The trouble starts when we reverse the two."
mhm.
So those are some of the sage comments, and then some of the advice that comes out through the book.
Has anyone provided you with any feedback on the quotes that front load the book?
Yeah, oh yeah, people love it. That some of them, a lot of people will skim a book first,
Hmm.
right? They don't do it in the bookstore as much as they used to. Although there's some evidence that bookstores are coming back a little bit. But yeah, people are telling me that they love the quotes. That's what pulls them in. What also we're hearing is people are seeing themselves in the book.
Oh,
Same thing
yeah.
happened with my TED talk, and that really is a good parable book or a good TEDx talk is when people can see themselves in the message in the story, and they'll tell their own story in their own head.
Hmm.
Just like in a novel, people will visualize the characters the way they want to visualize them.
Right.
The author will give you some hints as to what they look like, yada yada. But then you start to create your own. Well, the same thing with the parable book and the TED talk. I want people to see themselves in the message because then they get invested in the message and they're more likely to stay with it. They're also, when they learn the lessons are they're going to buy into the lessons a little bit more because they see themselves, right? They
Hmm.
see the mistakes they've been making or they see the
Right.
opportunity for themselves. So that's another reason, to back to one of your first questions, another reason for a parable book is to help the readers see themselves in the book itself. They're not just a third person observer, they're
Hmm.
actually engaging in the story as the story goes.
Right, which I think is especially important when you're trying to teach them something rather than just entertain them. Because I know I've read books on financial advice or investing, and then the people that they're using as examples are so far away from my lifestyle or my financial situation that it just feels like, why am I bothering? I don't have a trust fund to lean back on. I didn't marry a doctor.
Well, and that's the reason we did this book, by the way. This book is not to replace the books on finance. And it's not to replace financial advisors. In fact, financial advisors are buying the book for their clients. Just last
Oh,
week,
I
an
love that.
advisor bought 75 for his clients. And because what we want to do with the book is, number one, become more aware of your money story, your self talk.
Which is a
right?
great place to start too, because how do you even know then where to go from there if you're so lost that you don't understand these terms, or not even the terms, but the
Yeah.
importance of it,
Yes.
or
Yes.
you feel like you're already in this helpless situation and there's no possible way to reframe your perspectives around money or finances, and that you need that boost or that jump start, which something like this gives you.
You've got to do the reframe. And what happened for me is as I learned how money worked, I've been in financial services for 34 years now. As I learned how money worked, that's what helped me see my beliefs and limiting beliefs and mistaken assumptions.
Mhm.
So the book also provides some basic knowledge, nothing super technical, but some basic principles and knowledge. And then what that does is then people can reflect and go, oh, okay, I didn't know that. And I didn't have a belief. So, and the overarching premise of the whole book is this idea that you kind of hinted at is if we're stuck somewhere, if we've got a problem, a challenge, business, personal, whatever it is, yeah, we can look for a strategy, we can look for a tactical answer, but sometimes we got to take a step back and look at what is the belief? What do
Mhm.
we believe about ourselves, about the other person, if it's in a marriage or relationship, about our product, our service, the context, the industry, whatever it is, what are we believing that may actually be hindering us from seeing other strategies and tactics that will solve the problem. So that's the whole principle of the book. Originally I was going to write a book that was going to cover that whole concept, and I was going to talk about beliefs in marriage and beliefs in business and beliefs in sales and beliefs. And then I realized, no, I got to narrow it a little bit. So then we got into the money thing. But that whole principle is we've got to find out what are those unconscious stories, if you will, we call it a money story, that you've told yourself for so long that you believe it to be true, but it's really fiction
Mhm.
and it's holding you back.
Well, for other authors, when writing this type of story, do you think it's important to start with the lesson or the story when you begin drafting?
I think that's going to be a personal choice. Everybody has different ways to go about the creative process. So in mine, obviously, I started with the lessons, and then the story got crafted around it. Because it was about money, and I knew the teachings were going to be around money, I naturally wanted to look for some sort of a setting where it made sense to talk about money. So I had a couple of ideas. I forgot the others. We landed on the bank. Um, but I think everybody's a little different around that. Some singer songwriters write the words first, and some write the melody first. I don't think there's a right way.
So, what did you start with first?
I started with what I knew, right, and then I went looking for the author to fill in the blanks of the other side. I tried writing. Tried first to write the story, and it would have been terrible. It would have been the worst of the worst parable books. Not worth putting out. I'm not good that way. I'm good at improv. I can improv my way, through anything, but to actually describe characters and to create that dialogue. Now I contributed,
Mm-hmm.
so I contributed maybe 20% to the dialogue and the plot twists and all of that. So I have the ability to impact that, but it wasn't my forte. So you start where you start. You start where you are.
Yeah.
I think for anybody.
No, good
Uh,
advice. Yeah.
and by the way, I know since you talked to a lot of writers. Listen, I learned a great piece of advice. Maybe this is old hat to you and your listeners, but it really helped me. And that is, there is no such thing as writer's block. There is only thinker's block.
Ooh.
See, you're lacking the idea, you're lacking the thought. And so how do you unblock that? How do you unblock the thinker's block? Well, there's a lot of ways. You can go take a walk and just talk to yourself. You can call a friend or a colleague and have them just start asking you questions. So it's not writer's block, it's thinker's block. And once I got that awareness, I go, oh, okay, yeah. So I just got to change the context. I got to change my state. I got to have somebody ask questions. I've got to talk it out with someone. I've got to walk around the block and just get both hemispheres of my brain firing again. And then the thoughts come. And then it's, so I,
Yes.
I rarely get stuck on the writing side of things for very long anyway.
Yeah, I found that even with editing, I might call my mom and talk to her, and I'm, just using very vague terms about I feel stuck with this, something doesn't feel right. And she's not even always giving me any possible advice or answers, and it's still something comes up where I think, aha, that's it. Okay, I have to go now.
Well, I'll tell you, there's actually neuroscience that backs this up. I use this in other parts of my business. So the simple act of speaking aloud,
Mm-hmm.
talking something out loud, could be to yourself, could be to your mom, could be to a friend that you gather, say, hey, I got to talk through this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Starts to create clarity. It happens in the brain. It starts to write new neurosynapses in the brain. Um, and so speaking out loud actually helps find clarity. So that's why even just talking out to yourself,
Yes, you just justified my need for external processing, so thank you.
yes, external processing is very valuable for most people, no question.
And then for our last question, what
Yeah.
lesson did you learn while writing The Hidden Heist?
Oh boy, what lesson did I learn writing The Hidden Heist? Well, I learned that a couple things. I learned that I have that creative side of me that needs to come through even more. So while I maybe couldn't author a parable book, I do have the ability to contribute to story and to tell stories. So that kind of was that part was nurtured, if that makes sense a little bit.
Yeah.
I also learned I learned a lot about how that's the whole act of writing and all these money story interviews that I did. I just learned how much junk is in people's heads around money.
Mm.
I mean, first of all, the average adult, and it varies a little bit based on age, but the average adult thinks about money 4 hours every day.
Oh, geez.
And sometimes it's a scarcity thought, not always. It may just be figuring certain things out. But I mean, look, if you think about it, they always say follow the money, right? Money
Right,
makes the
right.
world go round. Well, there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, money is an integral part of our life, and it touches every part of our life. There isn't a part of our life that money doesn't touch in some way or another. Money isn't good, money isn't bad. It just is. It's a tool that we use. And if we have the right relationship with money, then we can use the tool properly. If we don't have the right relationship with money, then we either don't use it properly or misuse it.
Hmm.
And so that's the big lesson that came for me is how to understand what's going on with people around money, and then how can I help more? How can I help people get clear on their money story and where it's serving them or not serving them? And then just give them some basics. Compounding. Albert Einstein calls compound interest the eighth wonder of the world.
Yes.
Right? There's a lot of lessons I learned around that too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well, thank you again. And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for additional information, including all of Bill's links. And if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd appreciate if you could rate or review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. See you next week.